Good choice to end on because it's the point everyone agrees with in principle and nobody has finished in 159 years, which tells you the obstacle isn't analysis, it's mechanism. So let me spend most of this on the how, but first be precise about what the barriers actually are, because the fuzziness of the term is part of why the file never closes.
Okay, I definitely think it's doing a better job reading than I do. So we're gonna stick with this for a bit and see how this goes.
Closes. What internal trade barriers actually means. Almost none of it is tariffs. Provinces can't levy those.
Yeah, like, so from my understanding, the idea of tariffs it's completely gone between provinces, and like they never really existed in that way. It was always like rules, like your trucks can only have this much weight on them, and that's different from the next province, and so the truck that's good in this province isn't good in this province, and so that becomes like an unseen trade barrier.
The real barriers come in 4 flavors.
It's not highlighting.
The real barriers come in 4 flavors. First, regulatory divergence. 13 jurisdictions, each writing their own rules for the same thing. A truck legally configured in Alberta may need different axle weights, tire specs, or logging rules in Ontario.
That's exactly what I was saying. Like, just when you have 13 sets of different rules around trucking, then you prevent easy flow of trucking across the entire country. It becomes a trade barrier, even though like there's no direct tariff. It was not decided to be a trade barrier. It just became one because of how the system is set up.
Ontario, a food product labeled for one province may need relabeling for another. Construction materials certified in one province face recertification in the next. None of these rules is individually crazy. Each is a defensible local choice, but the divergence itself is the tax, because a firm serving the national market pays compliance 13 times, and small firms just don't bother, staying subscale in one province. Second, occupational licensing. Hundreds of regulated professions.
This is another huge one. People that are regulated. So we see this a lot, from my opinion, with like foreign workers that come in. And they come over and they're like a doctor, and then they have to go through a test in Ontario in order to prove that they're like a qualified doctor. But that they get proven, they go through the test, they get proven they're qualified, they're able to work, but then all of a sudden that certificate doesn't mean that they can go to another province and work. And there's like a whole nother barrier there, and they got to start the whole process again if they want to like reprove that they're able to work in Canada. And so there's a lot of people with credentials that can't work in their field because of regulation and just like provincial barriers and stuff. And it's preventing a lot of people from being able to work in the field that they've gone to school and they've trained for, which is just not a good thing to do.
Professions and trades, each governed by provincial bodies, with incomplete recognition of each other's credentials. A nurse, crane operator, or accountant moving provinces can face months of paperwork,
sometimes
re-examination, or supervised hours to do the identical job. Third, explicit discrimination, the diminishing but real category of rules that overtly favor local firms. Liquor boards that stock local wine preferentially, procurement preferences, dairy processing rules. Alcohol is the
like a liquor board that stocks local wine preferentially. I don't really see an issue with that one. Like that's like support local businesses kind of thing, and but like I don't know. Like one of the things that is more common now in Canada is you go to a grocery store and you see the Made Canadian label. And that's just like a national way of supporting local business. And so I don't really see an issue with that one. Procurement preferences, dairy processing rules. I don't understand those ones. Procurement preferences. I don't know. Let's continue.
Liquor boards that stock local wine preferentially. Procurement preferences, dairy processing rules. Alcohol is the notorious case. It remains genuinely difficult to ship wine from a BC vineyard directly to a consumer in Ontario, a restriction rooted in a 1928 statute and provincial liquor monopolies' revenue interests. Fourth, parties.
We did a whole thing on monopolies and why that can be bad. That was one of the whole other points. Let's continue from here.
Fourth, party-specific exceptions. Fourth, party-specific exceptions formally carved into the Canadian Free Trade Agreement itself. Pages of them, each protecting some provincial sensitivity. The cost estimates vary with methodology. The widely cited figures run from a few percent of GDP. The IMF and Bank of Canada work on regulatory divergence, up to the $200 billion annual figure that circulated in 2025 political discourse, which bundles optimistic assumptions.
Whenever you see that, you should say approximate. And it doesn't get that one. So up to approximately 200 billion annual figure that circulated in the 2025 political disclosure, which bundles optimistic assumptions. And so this is the cost of trade barriers. Not like direct tariffs, but the policies that affect trade.
An honest advisor says, the true number is uncertain but large. It's concentrated in productivity effects, firms staying small, competition staying local, rather than visible prices, and even the low-end estimates dwarf what Canada could gain from any plausible new international trade agreement. We spent decades negotiating access to foreign markets while leaving our own fragmented. Why it never finishes.
That's true.
The structure of the problem. 3 structural features make this file uniquely sticky. Constitutionally, most of the relevant regulation is validly provincial. The federal government cannot simply legislate the barriers away, and the Supreme Court's 2018 Comeau decision, the Free the Beer case, confirmed that S.121 of the Constitution doesn't prohibit provincial rules with incidental trade effect.
So, this stems from the federation nature of our country, where provinces are given more power, more leeway to make their own decisions. And it's caused an issue where trade between said provinces is getting massively impacted to approximately 200 billion, with optimistic assumptions, but still a large number, and that's preventing trade from between provinces. It's a cost the Canadians have to pay. Like, it seems so stupid that we negotiate this huge agreement with the U.S. and Mexico, CUSMA, and in many ways that makes trading with the U.S. easier than trading with other Canadian provinces. Like, creating a Canadian free trade rule set is something we should have had a long time ago. from the federal level. But it goes back to the federation aspect. Provinces have more power. I don't know. I think doing it from the federal level, actually creating a defined rule set so that each province can't just change, oh, trucks have to have a different axle ratio or something. And then all of a sudden you got to switch trucks and it's a massive cost to everyone shipping across the border. Like, just stopping that, setting up an administration or a department that looks in and then regulates what the proper axle ratio should be for all of Canada. It would save a lot of money, and it would massively increase trade, and it would increase competition, and that would lower prices. Okay.
So this must be accomplished with provinces, not over them.
Yeah.
Politically, each individual barrier has a concentrated defender, a regulator, a professional body, a liquor board, a local industry, and diffuse beneficiaries, the same asymmetry as the competition file, multiplied by 13 governments. And institutionally, the existing machinery is consensus-based. The CFTA 2017 works by unanimous agreement of 14 governments. Its regulatory reconciliation and cooperation table moves at the speed of the slowest participant, and its dispute mechanism is weak. Consensus machinery produces lowest common denominator outcomes on schedule.
Consensus machinery produces lowest common denominator outcomes on schedule. Let's go through that section again. The Canada Free Trade Act of 2017 works by unanimous agreement of 14 governments, so all the provinces and the federal. Its regulatory reconsideration and cooperation table moves at the speed of the slowest participant. Oh, that's rough. Like, so the idea is to make the free trade across Canada possible. You have to work with provincial governments because of the federal system. We live in a federation, right? Provinces have more power. Canada is a federation, correct? Where provinces have more power. Is that the word they use? Well, let's just check. I might be getting it confused with another system. But I know that the provinces in Canada have more control and more autonomy than a state in the United States would have. Federation. The power is constitutionally divided between the federal government and the provinces, mainly through Section 91 and 92 of the Constitution Act of 1967. Okay, so yeah. And so the federal government has to work with 13 provincial and territorial governments, and the whole system moves at the speed of the slowest participant, and its dispute mechanism is weak. This system needs to be remade if we're going to get any kind of actual free trade across all of Canada. You need a regulatory body that actually has the power to make these decisions. And so you would need the provinces and territorial governments to agree to give a regulatory body the ability to make these decisions. And that's going to be a hard sell, but I think it would bring enough benefit to the country as a whole um, that it would be worth doing. Like approximately $200 billion lost because of the internal trade barriers that we have. Like that's just, like, we can just fix that. We can just fix that. Oh, looks like there's been a breakthrough. Let's see.
The 2025 breakthrough. Bill C-5's One Canadian Economy Act, removing federal-level barriers and mutual recognizing federal requirements.
Yeah, I remember hearing about this, but then this is federal-level barriers. The majority of the barriers were provincial-level barriers, from province to province. And they did not address that. Like, it was a step forward, moving federal barriers, but they weren't the ones that we really needed to get rid of. Okay.
Requirements, plus the wave of provincial reciprocity legislation, Nova Scotia's Mutual Recognition Act, Ontario's, and the bilateral MOUs that followed, changed the momentum, but not yet the structure. The federal barriers were the small slice. The provincial legislation is a patchwork of bilateral deals with varying carve-outs. The advisor's job is to convert momentum into architecture. The core tool, mutual recognition as default.
Okay, let's continue. Okay, so the core tool, mutual recognition as default.
Default. The single most important design choice is mutual recognition rather than harmonization. Harmonization, getting 13 governments to agree on one common rule, is how the CFDA's reconciliation table works, and it's glacial because every rule requires a negotiation.
Yep.
Mutual recognition inverts the burden. If a good, service, or credential is lawful in one province, it is lawful in all. No negotiation required. Exception.
So that just completely gets rid of the need for the harmonization. The issue is, obviously, you have to get all 13 provinces and territories to agree to mutual recognition. But the benefits to agreeing are large. But you still have to get them all to agree. You'd still need some kind of regulator. And the provinces and territories would need some kind of control over the regulator. I don't know. I think that might be hard to sell.
Mutual recognition inverts the burden. If a good, service, or credential is lawful in one province, it is lawful in all. No negotiation required. Exceptions only where a province affirmatively justifies a specific health or safety concern. This is how the EU cracked the same problem, the Cassis de Dijon principle.
The Cassis de Dijon principle. So this worked across the EU. Like it's crazy that the EU has, in many cases, less trade barriers between EU countries than Canada has between provinces. Like, you think we would have figured this out? The Cassis de Dijon principle.
The Cassis de Dijon principle, and how Australia did it with its 1990s Mutual Recognition Act, which is the closest constitutional analog to Canada's situation. One legislative act, default recognition, enumerated exceptions done. Australia's scheme, notably, was accomplished through coordinated legislation. States referred narrow powers and passed mere statutes, creating a binding national framework without constitutional amendment. The Canadian version, a mutual recognition agreement with legislative force in every province, covering goods, services, and credentials with a negative list. Everything is covered except enumerated exceptions, rather than the CFDA's original positive list instinct. The negative
Ooh. So the whole idea is rather than creating a system where everyone has to rubber stamp it before it's okayed, and so you need the 14 stamps. You create a list where someone has to. You make it everything is okay by default, and you have to create the exceptions. Um, and so anyone can create, but it has to be rather than okaying something, you're saying no. Um, and the fact is, a lot of a lot of times things just get held up in bureaucracy. And so if the bureaucracy is no, then things just continue on going normally, and then you let them in a limited capacity say no to a specific type of product or credential or something, provided they gave a good reason. Then okay, yeah, that's fine. Um, but you're not shutting down the whole system, and the whole system continues to work, and provide free trade across provinces across the whole country. I think it's a really good idea, and it's literally how the EU did it and how Australia did it, and that's our the closest thing we can look at the Canada situation.
The Canadian version, a mutual recognition agreement with legislative force in every province, covering goods, services, and credentials with a negative list. Everything is covered except enumerated exceptions, rather than the CFTA's original positive list instinct. The negative list matters enormously because it flips the political economy. Today, extending free trade requires proponents to win each fight. Under a negative list, maintaining a barrier requires its defender to publicly justify it forever on a published list that trade ministers review annually. Sunlight plus default open is the whole design philosophy. The federal playbook.
So sunlight plus default open is the whole design. Sunlight means that like everyone can see what's happening. So basically, if someone wants something on the negative list, you will see why they want it on the negative list and the reason why they want it on the negative list, and that just opens it to public scrutiny. Like, oh, you're trying to stop free trade because of this reason. It better be a good reason, right? Or you're gonna get pushback from the public. So moving from a positive list to a negative list, and the whole thing is open by default. I mean, like, that's definitely the way to go. And allowing the creation of the negative list still gives the provinces their impact and authority. Like, they could still, like, you're not taking away their power to influence it. It's still there. It's just now open to public scrutiny with a default open setting. I think that's a good idea. Just checking on something. Okay, let's start from here.
The federal playbook. How to actually get there.
Ooh, okay.
The federal playbook. How to actually get
down.
there. Since Ottawa can't legislate this, its tools are leadership, money, and asymmetric pressure. Concretely, 1. Finish the federal house and make it the template. C. 5 did the recognition piece. Add the model statute. Draft, with willing provinces, a uniform mutual recognition act, same text, negative list design, common exception criteria and review process, and get first movers to pass it identically, the way uniform commercial legislation propagates.
Ooh, so just create the list. there's like the whole idea is that this saves money and creates growth and economic value, right? And so certain provinces will um like they'll be attracted to it and they'll adopt it easily, and so you can get first movers to sign this, and you don't need the whole country. um if you get enough first signers, you'll there'll, there'll be clear value. You can get other people to sign on, and then you could pressure holdouts, and I think you could pretty quickly get the whole country to sign on to something like that.
Propagates. The Nova Scotia, Ontario reciprocity wave proved provinces will legislate. The risk now is 13 different reciprocity statutes with 13 different carve-outs, which just refragments the market one level up. Convergence on a single text is the near-term prize. 2. Pay for it conditionally. This is the leverage that has never seriously been used. Federal transfers to provinces run to tens of billions annually beyond the big statutory programs. Infrastructure agreements, housing accelerator money, labor market development agreements, health top-ups. Make a meaningful tranche conditional on mutual recognition adoption and exceptionless shrinkage, scored publicly.
Tranche. A tranche refers to a single portion, division, or installments of a larger whole. A mutual recognition, adoption, an exceptionless shrinkage scored publicly. Okay, a lot of this stuff is going to go over my
The precedent objection, federal coercion, is weaker than it sounds. Conditional transfers are how Medicare's national standards work.
The precedent objection. Federal coercion is weaker than it sounds. So, trying to coerce provinces, I think that one's true. I think the federal government trying to pressure provinces doesn't get anything done. The best way to get a province to do what you want is a reward structure. I mean, it's the best way to get anyone to do something you want. Create an incentive structure for it. Like that's just how humans work. Pressuring them doesn't get you it. Creating the incentive structure does. Let's start again from there.
The precedent objection, federal coercion, is weaker than it sounds. Conditional transfers are how Medicare's national standards work, and the housing file, point 5, already runs this play. The design detail that matters. The condition must bind on measured outcomes. Number of exceptions maintained, credential recognition timelines actually achieved, not on signing communiques, because provinces are excellent at signing communiques. And as noted in the housing discussion, a conditional transfer that always pays out is just a transfer. Someone prominent must visibly lose money once.
That is a problem I see across society in many areas. Something that is defined as conditional, but if it's conditional and it always pays out, it's not really conditional. Like, if you create a rule, but no one is punished for breaking the rule, it's not really a rule. Like, it's just now a fact. And so, if you create a system, you have to actively punish a province that doesn't follow the system, because they'll, as it says, they'll sign on, and they'll sign on to take any money you offer them. But if they don't then go through and do remove the barriers and actually have the default open system implemented, you have to have the system to claw that money back. And if you don't do it, then you won't get results. Like, we see this in a lot of business in the US where rather than paying a super high price for providing the best safety for employees, they'll pay a lower price for when that employee gets hurt, because it's cheaper just to pay out a fine, essentially, when the employee, one of your employees gets hurt, you pay a fine rather than paying for all the expensive safety gear. And if it's more cost efficient to pay the fine, then don't be surprised when the company doesn't have any of the safety gear. Like, you have to make sure the fine is more than the cost of actually purchasing the safety gear and the safety training that would be necessary to keep an employee safe. Yeah, cold's still coming back. Still here a little bit. I'll probably do a shorter one today, but we'll get through the 2 at least. Yeah, that the whole thing is, you got to create consequence, and you have to make the consequences worse than the crime, or people are still going to do the crime, essentially. Just how people work. You got to have a way to hold the provinces accountable.
3. Use the federal spending and procurement power directly. Federal procurement can require that bidders' goods and credentials be accepted across provincial lines as a condition of eligibility. Federal infrastructure money can require that any project it funds accept materials certified anywhere in Canada and workers licensed anywhere in Canada. This creates facts on the ground, national market behavior inside every federally touched project, without touching provincial jurisdiction at all.
Because this is one of the big ones, right? Where you can get a credential in one province and then that not be transferable to another province, and you have this whole long process you got to go through if you want to be a doctor in Alberta, when you were a registered working doctor in Canada. And like, I kind of get it, because there's, like, you don't want a bad doctor who's like, if you were a good doctor in Ontario, okay, why are you moving out here to Canada? Were you like losing your practice or something? Maybe. Like in America, they have this huge issue with gypsy cops, which is a police officer who essentially loses their job because of malpractice. But they're not like, they don't have like a criminal record or anything. So they just take their experience and they go to another police department and get a job there. They have all this experience. They've worked as a police officer. So you think, oh, they're moving just because of family or whatever, but they're moving because, he lost his job due to a malpractice issue. And because that isn't recorded in their systems, they have this huge issue with bad cops jumping from district to district. And so stuff like that does happen. Maybe they're trying to get a job in Alberta because, their clinic got shut down in Ontario. And so having a system in place to verify competency at their job is it's not a bad thing for a province to do. The issue is the speed at which you verify people is so slow that it's causing so many issues. And the system you want in place is one where a bad doctor or a bad cop will lose their license and not be able to even apply across borders, across provinces. And if you had a good system that, like a good system of consequence for these people, then you could have a more open credential system across borders. If you properly punish the people that were like misusing the system or not adequate at their profession. If a gypsy cop lost their like was blacklisted from being a cop, then you can more easily accept cops from across different counties, different precincts, different provinces. But you have to have that system in place so that the system itself doesn't break down, and you know you're not letting over a potential issue into your own province. So like I understand why it's there, but it's causing so many issues, and there is a better way to do it.
Four, fix the specific national networks Ottawa does control or convene. Trucking is the clearest. Interprovincial trucking is actually federal jurisdiction
Really?
constitutionally, but implementation was long ago delegated to provinces, producing the divergence in weights, dimensions, and safety rules that makes a cross-country haul a compliance obstacle course. Ottawa can reclaim standard setting for interprovincial carriers, one national rulebook for any truck crossing a border, which alone is worth real money given that essentially all interprovincial goods move by road at some point.
Like that's a big one. And they're saying that this is originally a federal jurisdiction. Well, I mean, take that one back. Ugh. Shalom is worth real money given. Like, this one would have a huge impact because trucking is the primary way which you move goods from province to province. And so any policy here that prevents trade or makes trade more difficult, it's like one of those base goods. It affects everything. Every good moving has to go through a truck, and if it now costs more to do this because of a compliance issue, then everything you purchase from another province is going to cost more because of this issue. And it's something that sounds like the federal government could just solve.
Point. Rail, aviation, banking, telecom are already federal. The remaining network file is credentials for federally connected sectors, transport, some health via national bodies, where Ottawa can fund and force national registries. 5. Alcohol as the demonstration project. Economically, it's mid-sized. Politically, it's the file every Canadian understands, and every barrier defender looks worst on. Direct-to-consumer shipping of Canadian wine, beer, and spirits across all provinces. The 2025 federal-provincial commitments moved this way. Nail it down as irreversible, with the liquor boards compensated through their wholesale margins, if necessary. A visible consumer when early build.
Liquor boards, like, because liquor boards have quite a bit of power in each different province, right? Compensated to their wholesale margins if necessary. So just get it done, basically, because this is the would be the test project of it.
A visible consumer when early builds the public constituency the file has always lacked, because the deep problem of internal trade politics is that its beneficiaries don't know they're beneficiaries. Make one benefit legible. 6. Credentials with teeth and clocks. Labor mobility is where the productivity gains are largest and the human story sharpest. The mechanism: statutory recognition deadlines, A complete application from a worker licensed elsewhere in Canada must be decided in 10 to 30 days. Default approval if the clock expires. The shot clock logic from point 4 applied to licensing bodies.
Ooh. Decided in 10 to 30 days. Default approval if the clock expires. So a lot of what it's saying is that you lean in the default open, default yes, for many of these credentials and trade things, and you have to give a reason if you want to put any kind of barrier in place. But the default to it would be yes, and in this case they apply for a license in another province, and they have a specific time clock on it where you get to look at it, and if it goes over that clock, it's just defaulted yes. Okay.
Bodies. A single national application portal so a nurse doesn't navigate 13 websites, and the structural fix. Pressure on provinces to convert self-regulating professional bodies' mobility rules into government-set rules, because licensing bodies are incumbent-run by construction and have every incentive to slow-walk competitors' entry. BC and others have begun overriding regulators on international credentials. The interprovincial version is easier, since the training is Canadian everywhere. 7.
So BC, there's actually provinces that have already started doing this. And it's stating that regulators are basically incentivized to slow walk competitors' entry. I mean, they basically are, right? If you're a big industry and you spend a lot of money on politics in your province, you don't want to allow a competitor industry into your province. You would spend money to affect the regulator, to slow walk the entry of any other competitors, and limit them as much as possible. It's just natural, but competition is how you get better products. It just is. Better, more affordable products.
Seven. Rebuild the machinery. Replace consensus with something that can decide. The CFTA's governance should move to qualified majority decision-making for reconciliation items. Its dispute process should be open to firms and individuals, not just governments. A company blocked by a provincial rule should be able to bring the case itself, as under trade agreement investor provisions, and penalties should sting. And publish the scoreboard, an annual public index of each province's exception count, recognition timelines, and
Use shame. Use shame. Okay? It is surprisingly effective. I don't know why, but basically in everything it is. Using shame is surprisingly effective. What province isn't making free trade a thing? Give us a list. Who's at the bottom of the list? Who do we point and laugh at?
recognition timelines, and barrier costs. Provinces respond to league tables far more than to communiques, the shaming mechanism from the permitting dashboard federalized. Sequencing and the political read. Year 1. Uniform Mutual Recognition Statute drafted and passed by the Willing Coalition, the 2025 Momentum Provinces. Trucking Rulebook federalized, Alcohol DDC completed, Scoreboard published. Years 2-3. Conditional Transfer Framework attached to the next infrastructure and LMDA renewals. Credential shot clocks in the Coalition Provinces, CFTA governance, renegotiation. The holdout dynamic then works for you rather than against you. As the mutual recognition zone grows, being outside it becomes a visible cost to a province's own firms and workers. Alberta businesses selling freely into a 9-province zone while Quebec's face friction is pressure no provincial treasurer ignores forever. Quebec will be the durable holdout on parts of this for identity and jurisdiction reasons, and the design should let the zone proceed at 9 or 10 provinces rather than waiting. Asymmetric federalism is annoying, but it's how everything in Canada eventually happens.
Oh, I guess that makes sense. Because of federalism, in the end, most things that end up as federal, global, or like federal Canadian law kind of go through a similar situation where it's adopted by willing provinces that see the benefit. And then once the benefit is established, more provinces join in, and then eventually Quebec also joins in. Once there's enough shame on them for being the holdout, right? Okay, let's continue.
The honest caveats. Some regulatory divergence is legitimate federalism. Provinces experimenting and reflecting local preferences is a feature, and mutual recognition actually preserves it better than harmonization does. Each province keeps its own rules for its own firms. It just can't project them onto others. The gains, while large,
that
arrive.
is the whole. You can create negatives, right? Like you can. Everything's good by default, but you're allowed to create like the negative list of these things are not okay, as long as you have a reason. So each province is still allowed to have their own negative list, but their negative list like it doesn't affect the rest of Canada, and so the okay by default does a lot of work. And it essentially it takes bureaucracy and it makes it work on your side rather than against you, because now before it was you needed bureaucracy to pass something. Now you would need bureaucracy to stop something, as therefore the bureaucratic hurdle is no longer in the way. If anything, it's allowing things to continue. Like the bureaucratic hurdle is now working for you, because you now have to go through the bureaucracy to stop something rather than to allow it. But you can still stop things if there is issues, and so the provinces are still allowed to keep their own negative lists.
The gains, while large, arrive diffusely, no ribbon cuttings, which is why the file needs the scoreboard and the alcohol-style legible wins to sustain attention past the first minister's meeting. And the exception...
That makes sense. So, because there's no ribbon cutting, there's no ceremony, you would need the scoreboard, which is the shame mechanic, to show who's doing the best, who's getting rid of stuff, who is performing well, and then obviously who is not, and then the alcohol style legible. That's the most visible thing that would bring, like, if you do this, you would see the price of alcohol come down basically like overnight, because so much of the price of alcohol, getting that alcohol to the shelf. And if you make that easier, it's a very visible thing many people will see immediately, as, oh, this will work. This will get us better product at a cheaper price. Look at it work here. Andrew Stream has some suggestions. Okay, thanks. And so the alcohol, doing it for one specific product like that, I think, like, proof of concept, right? If you could prove the concept to people, people will support it more.
And the exception list will be where the battle actually happens.
Yes.
Every interest that loses the headline fight will reappear requesting a carve-out, and the entire value of the architecture depends on the exception criteria being narrow, justified, and publicly reviewed. The EU's single market took decades of court cases and commission enforcement after Cassis. Canada's version needs its equivalent enforcement culture, which is why opening disputes to private parties matters more than it looks.
So the negative list is important, and having a good structure there, where things are not only publicly reviewed, so people can see why stuff is on the negative list and it's justifiable, but the ability to put stuff there is still important for provinces. Took decades. Ugh. Can't we make it quicker than that? The whole issue is anything that Washington tries to like vehemently push onto provinces faces so much pushback. What Ottawa has to do is it has to use the incentive structure, and I think there's so much waste and so much loss in having these inter-provincial trade barriers that you can use an incentive structure, and the incentive to join this would be very strong. Okay, let's finish.
The closing frame for the PM. This is the cheapest large number in the entire memo. No subsidies, no new spending beyond conditioning transfers already flowing, and 2025's combination of U.S. trade hostility and provincial legislative momentum created the first genuine political window in a generation. Windows close. The difference between this attempt and the last five is whether it ends with an architecture, default recognition, negative lists, clocks, scoreboards, private enforcement, or with another communique. Everything in the playbook above is aimed at that one distinction.
Okay. So I like this one. As it says, there's this is the cheapest large number in the entire memo. No subsidies, no new spending beyond conditional transfers already flowing. Like, this is the easiest win to get. To breaking down interprovincial free trade will make GDP go up. Like, it will. And it will probably do so substantially. And the easiest win. We just need the actual government to push it. Doesn't even require additional spending. Okay. Well, that was point one. We had skipped this one earlier. Actually finish internal free trade.